Hello everybody, my name is Luke Marr and this is Hot Mode, and today on Hot Mode we are coming to you with our Met Gala Roast and Review Part 3 for the 2023 Karl Lagerfeld Line of Beauty Met Gala theme. The theme was in honor of Karl, paying homage to Karl Lagerfeld and inspirations, references, etc., to his career. If you haven't watched Part 1 or 2 or our Met Explainer goddamn documentary, link in description box below. So we're going to start with Adut Akech wearing Carolina Herrera. She's standing next to Wes Gordon, who is the designer. It's a plunging pearlescent bodice style. It's strapless, it's easy. It hits around, I'm gonna say the top of the thigh area, which to me is a little bit drop waist-y. It's not entirely drop waist. To a degree, I see the drop waist inspiration. And as we hit that drop waist, we can see that a white tulle loofah-esque, floral-esque juts out and creates the beginning of the skirt. And then it is tiered with a little black tulle flounce. It comes down and we can see that the white comes, then black flounce, then white, then black flounce, then white. It does feel very Chanel, I think, between the pearls, the drop waist of this bodice, and then on top of it, the black sort of flounces that come down and create a tiered flounce. It was something that Karl did quite often. It was inspired by a lot of 1920s and 1930s sort of styles. It's not my favorite dress. I don't really love it. It doesn't really make me say, wow. It doesn't really make me say, oh my gosh, amazing. I don't love it. I do understand the context of it. I do see what's going on behind the scenes. I can name the references, bing, bang, boom. I just don't think it's really like a wow dress that's super memorable or super exciting. I don't think it's a bad dress. I just don't think it's ever going to be thought about again. That makes me a little sad. Next up, we have Alia Bhatt, and she is wearing Prabal Gurung. Now, this is Alia Bhatt's first Met Gala, and she is going for a full Chanel bridal experience. That is what the inspiration was. And this dress, I will say, is covered in pearls. I think that there's very few sections of this dress that really isn't. I would say maybe the skirt, but even then, it's pretty dense in terms of pearls. It's a gorgeous little scoop neck bodice. It's easy, it's breezy, it's beautiful. The white color, again, Chanel, bride. I think Prabal also talked about like Alia Bhatt being a virgin to the Met Gala. So it's a beautiful dress. It's really pretty. She looks great, but like, am I bored? Yeah. I am. I get it. Pearls. It just feels so surface level Karl Lagerfeld. We're looking for a little bit more than surface level referencing here on this channel. Any other channel, they'll say, oh my god, she looks amazing, which is true. I will say, oh my god, she looks amazing. True. But I just think that, oh, a pearl dress. There isn't like a robe de style sort of situation going on where it's a drop waist and we get this big, beautiful sort of skirt. It feels very 1920s. I think we're missing out on the veil element. We're missing out on maybe a little bouquet element going on to really sell us on that Chanel bride situation. Karl's brides usually wore veils. They usually had some sort of accessory, whether that was a hat or a handbag or accessories or there's something there. I think this feels so stripped down that it also makes it hard to really sell the idea of like a bride. Yes, it's a beautiful white pearl dress. Sometimes that does not make a bride. Like, we're looking for a lot more in terms of fashion. Next up, we have Allison Williams wearing Patou. Now, she is sitting next to Guillaume Henry, who is the creative director of Patou. Now, listen, the thing that I love about this is Patou was the brand where Karl became creative director for the first time. It was the first brand that he ever really got to have direction. He really was in charge of collections, of creating garments. And so it's really cool that Allison Williams is wearing this sort of apricot dress. It's a fitted gown up top in terms of the bodice. There's a beautiful sort of skirt that falls down, hits the floor, pulls a little bit too much for me. As for this big sort of bow that juts out on her left shoulder, I love it. I think it's fun. And the other part that's really, really great about it is literally direct reference to one of Karl's designs for Patou. So like, I don't want to hear anybody be like, it's so boring, it's so uninteresting. Like, no. This is like Patou actually doing what they needed to do, which was sell you on the history in honor of Karl. For some people, they're going to be like, well, it's not really Karl. It doesn't have pearls. It's not in black and white. It is. It is. It's just that this is a little bit deeper than the surface level petty bullshit that everybody else churned out for whatever awful reason. Personally, I love the dress. I think it's a beautiful reference. I think it's super wonderful. I think the color is really, really gorgeous. I think she looks lovely. The fit is great. Hats off to the Patou gang. Next up, we have Anok, and she is wearing Prabal Gurung as well. It is a gold fitted and little plunging neckline dress. It's pretty much cocktail-ified, and this gold sort of ombres and all of these beautiful big paillettes down to around the edge of the skirt and creates a silver fluidity, a cascadation. Then we see these big sort of strands, I believe, of little pearls or beads that flow down and create sort of like a fringe. And then there is I would say a dark brown underskirt that creates a train. There's also this very sheer brown sheath that comes underneath and hits the floor and also creates a train. Anok, beautiful, stunning, gorgeous. And I will say that in the actual exhibition, there are pieces that go from this sort of gold into silver. So it definitely has Karl Lagerfeld provenance. And it's not the boring stuff of pearls, tweed, black and white, oh my. It's actually kind of an interesting take on Karl's work. Listen, feels a little bit busy. I think maybe the brown sheer sheath and the train was unnecessary. I just think it clunks up the rest of the look because you have a lot going on between the sort of belle cocktail dress and the fringe and the gold ombreing into the silver, sunglasses, and the veil. There's a lot going on, so I think maybe we could have stripped away. It's a little dense. But besides that, I like the look. I think it's fun. Again, it's not surface level referencing. I'm with it. Next up, we have Ashley Park, and she is wearing Michael Kors. Now listen, do I really love this look? No, but I do think that it actually is a Karl Lagerfeld reference. If we zoom in, we can see that this dress is made up of a black sequined fishnet. In reality, the sequins are very Michael Kors. It's something that he really, really loves. He's been doing it, honestly, I would say now, probably like 3 or 4 years at this point. But we can see that this fishnet falls all the way down, creates a beautiful silhouette, fits her beautifully, creates a big, beautiful train that flows out. There also is a little bit of Chanel accessorization going on here too. At the waist, there's this black patent leather belt, and from that belt flows silver chains and some pearls. They were dark pearls that sort of ombre into lighter pearls. We also have matching patent leather fingerless gloves. The jewelry, it all feels very Chanel, but what I think is it's a reference to Chanel's Fall 1991 collection, which had these really, really beautiful sort of fishnet tops that had these gorgeous belts with gold chains that flowed off of them, and then they were decked out in jewels on top to sort of signify that Coco Chanel layering of jewelry, costume jewelry effect. Listen, I think that weirdly enough, this is a great reference because it transforms this very iconic kind of collection. It makes it a little bit more Michael Kors minimal. It's a little bit more American. It's a little bit more commercial. It's a little bit more not scary to the Midwest. I think the fit of it is really, really phenomenal. The way that that skirt really flows out, it's fantastic. Overall, I think it's a great way of Michael Korsifying a Karl Lagerfeld reference. Shout out to Ashley Park and Michael Kors. I'm shocked because this is honestly hit the girls. To be honest, I'm never like, oh my god, Michael Kors, MET Gala, but I think this one actually really hits the nail on the head. Next up, we have Aubrey Plaza. She is wearing Stella McCartney. Now, there's a big uproar about, Stella McCartney talking about her experience with Karl Lagerfeld when she took over from Chloé. One Nepo baby attacks another Nepo baby. The gasp. It's fine. Also, I'm not going to say, oh my god, Karl Lagerfeld comments like approved, but I mean, at the same time, like, I personally think there are some great Karl Lagerfeld slander quotes about other fashion designers, which are truly iconic. One of my favorites is that when Alia died, Karl Lagerfeld was talking to his florist, and the florist said, oh, do you want to send flowers? And Karl Lagerfeld said, no, send a cactus. He wasn't great in so many respects, stand by that, but in other respects, he knew how to sling it. That's my thoughts on the Stella McCartney thing. I mean, like, oh my god, a Nepo baby dragged. Didn't we all do that on Twitter, like, what, 3 months ago? So I don't really get the hate. But the other thing is this dress, Aubrey Plaza, let's get into it. It's a singular shoulder, deep plunge, white dress with a little cutout on the right hip. It is most definitely trimmed in a silver crystallized chain effect that runs down and around. The dress is made out of eco-friendly viscose, and I'm sure that, the crystals are also done very eco-friendly, and that's great and that's wonderful, but like, I just feel like we could have went through the Chloé archives maybe and touched upon that. I don't know, I just feel like a flowy, beautiful white dress could have worked out really, really well. The thing about Stella is, like, when she was at Chloé, she obviously, like, did her own take on a lot of Chloé's sort of house signatures, which for the most part, not entirely, but for the most part, were invented by Karl. So I feel like a fun trompe-l'oeil sort of style could have been really, really cool. A fun take on like a flowy, diaphanous, draped white gown. I just think that there are other things that we could have done here. I also read the Instagram captions from Stella, and like they talk about, oh, this is inspired by Fall/Winter 2023. Fall/Winter 2023 was not inspired by Karl Lagerfeld, so like I think we're bullshitting here. I think it's a little bit of, oh, oh yeah, you know, it's Karl inspired, but also like from our most recent collection. That to me is blah. I think it's the one night of the year where it's like, just go for it. And also like you have a direct tie-in. It's easy. It's like a slam dunk. You don't even really have to do anything else. All you have to do is recreate one of your styles from Chloé. So I don't get that. That annoys me. And also like the dress isn't even that good. I don't think the fit is great. I think the way that it hits the floor is like blah. You know, that makes me sad too, because like everybody likes Aubrey Plaza. Okay, I do. The fact that it's not working out here, upsetting to me. Next up, we have Ava Max. She is wearing Christian Siriano. I believe that it is her first time at the Met Gala. I like it a lot. It is very sort of Chanel bride, I would say. I think between the white, the hood, beautiful skirt that falls out of the back, and the sheath dress in the front. It's lovely in that way. It's gorgeous. It's pretty da-da-da-da. But the thing that really makes it Karl Lagerfeld-esque to me is the fact that we have this rolled off the shoulder sort of neckline. Karl Lagerfeld did that. Like that was his sort of signature. It's a style that he kind of invented. It's something that very much so is attributed to him. And I think that Christian Siriano did a very, very good job here of recreating that. And again, it's a really simple, subtle, Karl Lagerfeld specific, not a certain designer or a certain brand, but Karl Lagerfeld specific house code was being tapped into. You know me, I'm not ever Christian Siriano amazing, but in this concept, I think that Christian Siriano did a great job. I think that Ava Max looks really, really gorgeous. I think the dress works. I think it's easy. I think the focal point really is that off the shoulder band. It looks lovely. I'm very into it. Check plus. Next up is Bella Ramsey, who is wearing Thom Browne. Now listen, the look is essentially a Thom Browne sort of long double-breasted jacket, a pleated skirt, and then a pair of pants underneath with a little cuff. There's a patent leather boot. The look really is kind of Karl Lagerfeld-ified by the dripping pearls that run down the pleated skirt and the jacket, and also the fact that it's rimmed in certain elements like the hem, you know, the lapels, pockets, in pearls too. I guess my thing is like, it just again feels a little bit one note. And that's like the shocking thing for me from Thom Browne is it feels like a lot of the people that they dressed, it just was like very heavily Chanel referencing, and there wasn't a lot of referencing from the other inspirations and things like that, which is the part that's upsetting. Because I just think that the Thom team is a lot more heightened than that. I think it looks nice. I think it's casual Thom. I think it's a three-piece suit done really, really well with the skirt. It's fun. It's easy. The pearls, I think, also look good. I just have a higher expectation of Thom Browne. So, listen, again, looks good, but I always want more. I expect more. Next up, we have Burna Boy, who is wearing a custom Burberry look. Now, I believe that this is based on the fall 2023 Burberry collection that was debuted by none other than Daniel Lee. It's made up of a black suit jacket, a black pant, and I think the jacket has a little bit of a drape that creates this long train that flows out, and there's a sheer crystal top underneath, and it seems that the crystal top also has the blue sort of checks that run all throughout, which I think is actually really smart, really cool, subtle detail that you have to really look up close for. But the thing about it is kind of very heavy Chanel referencing, but at the same time, I think this is a good example of I'm going to allow it because Burberry signature is a check. It's plaid. It's the Burberry plaid or the Burberry check. Coco Chanel, Scotland, very much so a part of the ethos of the brand. She went to Scotland. She sort of got the tweeds going on. It was a colonization moment, or one of them. Long story short, I think that Burberry, out of all the other brands, this is a house code of theirs. So to play on that, I think is rather smart. Do I think it could have been a little bit more inspired than this? Sure. But do I think that they're also trying to sort of play on the little Karl Lagerfeld details by adding those little zippers with the little zips that have little pearls right at the bottom? Yeah, sure. I think that's smart. I think that's cool. I think it works. Again, it's hard for me to fault Burberry specifically for doing their signature plaid when a Chanel signature is plaid. So like we're playing into what we do. And I think that that is smart, even though the look is maybe a little bit uninspired. Next up, we have Xukun, and he is wearing Prada. Psy is wearing this custom Prada look. It's a white shirt, black tie, black pant, you know, square toe boot, really, really easy. I think the thing that makes this look more of like the inspired element or makes it stand out from the rest of the menswear sort of styles is the embroidery that's going on throughout the entirety of the look. Now, on the tie, we can see that there is this sort of dense black and white sort of crystal, and it matches on the jacket that Psy is wearing as well. When I first saw it, I was like, boo, ugly, gross, uninteresting. And then I started to like cycle through, you know, the shows, the collections, the brands, and I'm pretty positive that this might be a reference to Chanel's fall 2012 collection. If we look up close, we can see that a lot of these little embroidered appliques look almost like crystals or look like pieces of crystal pretty positive that that Chanel Fall 2012 collection was based on crystals, and there was a lot of embroidery that was based on crystals, stalagmites, stalactites, amethysts, things like that. I think that might be where Prada is coming from. Again, in the same way that we have Burberry, Prada's house code to a degree is embroidery. It's very important to the brand. It's something that Miuccia Prada has always sort of worked with and worked on to sort of make modern and fun and young and cool. And I think that that is what we're getting here. Will I say that for the most part, it's kind of like a Karl Lagerfeld outfit tribute? Sure. But do I think that it's layered with a little bit of nuance in terms of a Chanel collection everybody might not talk about, or a part of a Chanel collection people might not even know existed? Yeah, and so I think that makes it a little bit more dense, a little bit more intriguing, a little bit more exciting. Next up we have Christina Ricci, and she is wearing Fendi. It is a full-length silver gown. I am pretty positive this is like a custom style from Kim Jones. I don't think it's inspired by a past Fendi haute couture, Fendi collection in general, which I think really was a little bit of an issue with the Fendi looks and celebs for me. Me and Kim Jones beef. I'm pretty positive this is meant to be based on like a Kim haute couture look and like Fendi haute couture. She gotta go. Not all of Fendi has to necessarily be fur. It doesn't. There was a lot of spring collections, and a lot of those spring collections, there was no fur. A lot of it was sheer, a lot of it was sexy, a lot of it was fun, it was humorous, it was cool. I don't think that this is any of those things. There might be a direct reference to a past Fendi collection. If I'm wrong, whatever. I just still don't think that the dress is great. I don't think that the fit of it is really miraculous. I don't think the draping around the hip area is cool. I don't think that the big side swag of fabric creating a train helps or works or does just about anything. I don't think bodice area is really A, well fitted, and B, intriguing, memorable, exciting, cool. I just think it feels flat and blah, and I think that Fendi, this was the chance, and I think there are some Fendi people that did definitely get some Karl Lagerfeld moments in there, but this was the moment to just like lay into the archive. This should be burned before it ever sees the archive. Next up, we have Emily Blunt, and she is wearing a custom Michael Kors look as well. It is a white lace floral top with a big collar, and from it juts a what looks to be like a horsehair sort of bow, and there's a little white camellia sitting on the front, so very Karl Lagerfeld outfit, personal style coded. It's a long, I believe, pair of pants that has a big skirt that flows out from the sides of it in black sequins. Michael Kors talked about like dichotomy with this look and how it was meant to sort of be a little bit Michael Kors, a little bit Karl, and like I get it. I think the lace, Karl, I think the shirt element, Karl, I think the black sequins, sure, Karl, camellias, da-da-da. But again, I think that this is one of those very surface level looking looks. It just feels black and white Karl Lagerfeld lace. I wish that the lace had been a little bit more inventive. I wish it had maybe referenced a cool, older Chanel look or something from, I don't know, any of the other brands that Karl worked for. I just think it could be more exciting, a little bit more cool, a little bit more nuanced. And I don't think it was that. I don't think she looks bad, but I don't think it's really, again, something anybody would say, oh, God, remember that Emily Blunt look? And you know what I mean? Like, we're talking about Emily Blunt. She is my gay icon, okay? Nobody wants to say this less than me. Next up, we have Emily Ratajkowski, and she is wearing a custom Tory Burch dress. Now listen, when I look at this dress, I say, ugly, absolutely ugly. But I think it's very Karl Lagerfeld coded. Drop waist dress in what I believe is like a beige chiffon that also has sort of black piping details that runs throughout it. Then there's a large beige skirt with continuation of that black sort of piping line work running through it from zoomed out. Again, ugly. But when we zoom in, we can actually see that this chiffon is pleated. It creates little lines that pay homage to the graphic notions and line work that Karl Lagerfeld did throughout his career. Again, bringing it back to something like Russian constructivism with Chanel and things like that. The black lines that run throughout, again, help to sort of continue and cut into those lines and that line work. And so I do think it's smart. There's also little tiny pearls that sort of dot certain areas and, you know, where these lines intersect. They sort of are the centerpiece. Pretty positive, again, Chanel sort of-ness coming through. And again, there wasn't much drop waist going on, but here I think Emily Ratajkowski has channeled it very well in Tory Burch. We can see that it is certainly a lower waisted style, and from that flows this big sort of gathered skirt that comes out And again, drop waist, 1920s, gathered skirt, very Chanel for Karl. I don't like the dress from a personal standpoint, but do I absolutely think that it is on theme? It has captured the idea and the notion of Karl Lagerfeld's work and the technical expertise that he developed over his time as a designer. Yeah, absolutely. I commend Emily Ratajkowski and Tory Burch on such things. Next up, we have Glenn Close wearing a custom Erdem look. In reality, I think it's a really intriguing look for Erdem because it's so devoid of the floral elements that I think we all associate with Erdem. There's a bunch of different sort of Erdem florals, and they go through all different styles and phases and aesthetics, but here it's just kind of completely barren of that, which I think is really, really interesting. Now, Erdem actually pulled together a bunch of different Chanel and Karl Lagerfeld references to make this look happen, and I think it's really intriguing. So, listen, first things first, let's point out the obvious ones. The starched collar, very Karl Lagerfeld. It's white, it's crisp, it's clean. It's not as high as I kind of would presume it would be, but I think it has a good effect in terms of referencing Karl. We also can see that there is a lot of jewelry sort of layered over top. It's crystals, it's tiered. It's meant to be an homage to the spring 1983 haute couture collection that Karl did, which had none other than Inès de la Forsange recreate this look of Coco Chanel herself with her jewels sort of all dripping all over her body. So that's what is going on there. The dress is pretty simple. It's a sheath dress in a very sort of light, I'm going to say blue sequin. It hits right above the floor, so it's right around foot area, not ankle length at all. But the thing that's really, really intriguing and a little bit more of a deeper Chanel reference, I would say, is this cape, which is inspired by the fall 1999 haute couture collection by Karl Lagerfeld for Chanel. I would say that when you look at the Devaney Oki image from Chanel, it is really, really Little Red Riding Hood sort of hooded cape inspired, whereas I feel like Glenn Close's Erdem look is a little bit more off-the-shoulder stole cape inspired. Like, there's definitely a difference in silhouette. And the other thing that, while we say it's a reference, I don't really see it in terms of the gathering of this cape that Glenn Close is wearing is really, really bunched up. It's really easy. It creates really like a flounce. Whereas when you look at the Devaney Oki fall 1999 haute couture look, it's a grid. It has all seams that create this really intriguing grid element, and I don't see that in the cape either. So my thing is, yes, it's great to say that something is inspired by something else, but maybe if we have a little bit more added in, it'd be a little bit more believable. I do think that it's an intriguing look. I definitely think that Glenn Close is on theme. I just think maybe we stretched a reference a little bit far, you know what I mean? It was a little reach. I think it's fine. Had it had more Lagerfeldian Chanel referencing, actually, I think it'd be a little bit more generous with it, but I think it's a far-flung idea of saying that this is inspired by that. The girls are different. Next up, we have Gustav Magnorvitso, and he is wearing a custom Palomo Spain look. Intriguing. Listen, it's black with white pearls in stripe form that run down the full suit. Normally just be like, I don't think it's really that great. I don't really think it's that intriguing. Black, white pearls. But there's something interesting, I think, about the actual cut of the garment that makes it a little bit more nuanced than I think we might just see from, bird's eye perspective. But do I think the pants need to be fitted better? Absolutely. That's messy. I wouldn't touch that with the 49.5 a pole personally. But as for the jacket, I do think it's really intriguing. And there's something about it personally that reminds me of sort of Elizabethan dress, which was a Karl Lagerfeld touch point in a very early Chanel collection. For the fall 1988 haute couture collection, Karl touched upon Elizabethan dress to a degree. And there's something about the shape of this jacket. It really sort of sucks in and creates this really bulbous sort of shape underneath the waist, which is intriguing. Length of the collar, I also think sort of adds to that. I will say I wish that we had done like a little fingerless glove. I think it would have just, again, Karl Lagerfeld-ified things. But so all in all, listen, I do think that there's probably a little bit of referencing to early Chanel in there, which works. I think the jacket in and of itself is really intriguing even without the actual referencing to Karl and Chanel. The pants, they gotta go. They need to be refitted. They needed to see a tailor. And the gloves should have been just chopped at the knuckle, but it's fine. We'll take it. Next up, we have Gwendolyn Christie, and she is wearing a custom Fendi look. It is a very light pink, fully draped gown. Honestly, I think it's kind of different for Gwendolyn because normally she's very avant-garde and things like that, and this feels a little bit more sort of toned down, a little bit more natural in a way. When I look at it, I say like, it's kind of boring, you know what I mean? But I do think that the draping element very much so is a part of the Fendi's collection, history, and culture. I also would say that Karl, to a degree, enjoyed draping. It was something that he did. It was something that learned at Patou, which was very big on sort of drapery. I understand it. I think that it very much so is a part more particularly of Fendi. I also think there's something about this very, very light, very, very draped, very, very textured fabric that is very much so a part of the late 1990s and early 2000s Fendi collections. To turn it into more of a gown shape, I'm okay with it. I think it works. I think it's sweet. I think it's chic. I think it feels Karl. It's just a very sort of subtle version of Karl that it's not the automatic way that we think of Karl. It's not the surface level stuff. Do I like it? Yeah. Do I wish it was a little bit more avant-garde? Sure. But I do think that it technically is on theme. Next up, we have Halle Bailey, and she is wearing a custom Gucci dress. It is a heavily sequined lace halter style dress. It's fitted, it's gorgeous. You have this layer of white lace, and then it's also covered in what looks to be iridescent paillettes and sequins. The paillettes and sequins sort of reflect very blue and pink. And then what also comes out of this big sort of shawl that she is wearing, a frothy, flouncy, and crystallized edge tulle confection. And honestly, I kind of like it. First things first, I do think it feels a little bit Little Mermaidy in like a good way though, because a lot of Halle Bailey's look are not my favorite. But I think that this kind of has a cool, crisp, watery feeling to it, the way light reflects off of water, things like that. That's what I feel is the vibe there. But at the same time, I think between the lace, between the halter cut, and the fact that for me, it feels a little bit his second round at Chloé. Personally, feels like a mixture of the fall 1995 and the fall 1996 collections. I do wish that with the lace, which is floral, maybe it had referenced fall 1995 from Chloé a little bit more, because in that lace, it almost looks coral-like, and I think that that would have been a really cool, subtle detail instead of the flowers. I think that would have played into The Little Mermaid. It would have been like a real fun nod. I think would have got a lot of headlines, and everybody would have been like, oh my god, her embroidery. So I think those are like the little subtle tiny details that are like, that would put it over the edge. But do have to say, I think that this is a pretty good look. I think, again, the halter style is very much so Karl's silhouette. It's something that he loved. The 1930s was constantly being referenced, even from his earliest collections at Chloé. I think that big frothy tulle sort of shawl jacket situation, it's lovely. And I think the way that the edges are all sort of crystallized also is just like, again, a really nice touch. It adds a fun, cool, different vibe to the look. I think Halle Bailey and Gucci killed this. Next up, we have Huma Abedin, and she is wearing a Fendi look. I believe that this is from the fall 2017 Haute Fureur collection. Now, that was Fendi's haute couture stylings while Karl was around. He brought it to fruition. It should die. But it's very much a cool sort of way that Karl went playing and experimenting with fur as a textile. And oftentimes, he didn't even use fur. He used other materials to essentially recreate the texture and idea of fur, which I think we're seeing here with this look specifically. So it's made up of a lace sort of neck and sleeve. It's really gorgeous. The lace, it's beautiful. Like the pattern that runs throughout is kind of like a hexagon. It has little sort of strings that move in and out. And then there's a sort of darker, more opaque floral motif that runs across the sort of collarbone area and down the sleeves. Really, really gorgeous. Then as we start right above the bust area, there is this black sort of feather, and it looks like a silver or white sort of fringe or tassel situation that begins, and then we move into what looks to be a sort of navy blue. We move back down to black feathers, and then as we get into the dress, it moves from a really, really fun, poppy, beautiful blue into light blue and then white as we reach the bottom. Fendi, they wanted to make sure that while yes, fur is an important part of the brand, they also wanted to find something that for customers that wanted to have something that looked like fur but they didn't want to buy fur, they could transform a different textile into looking like fur. So what they would do is they would take feathers and they would recreate or trim or treat those feathers to actually make them look like something else. So from afar, you could think, oh, that's an intriguing fur look. Then when you look up close, you say, oh, it's made up entirely of beautiful feathers. Gorgeous. And I think that's the great part about the Fendi haute fur that Karl brought to fruition. The ability to play with a textile to make it look like something that it's not, kind of like a trompe l'oeil. It all ties back into Karl's work and his house codes as his own house. I like it. I think it's sweet. Next up, we have Idris Elba and Sabrina Elba. Now let's talk about Idris first. He is wearing white tuxedo jacket. It's It's a beautiful sort of coat, white collar underneath, black tie, little vest, black pant, nothing crazy. Doesn't feel themed, so I don't like it. It's not exciting, it's not exhilarating, doesn't feel Karl, even really, you know what I mean? Like a starched collar wouldn't have hurt anybody. Flop. But as for Sabrina, I think that in a weird way, she is kind of on theme. I think that there's an element of the drop waist going on here. It's a strapless black dress with a big puffy skirt. Now there is a sort of roll over effect. It's not an off the shoulder rollover, but it's certainly rolled down in terms of the neckline, which I think is intriguing. So like maybe that was a Karl reference. I'm not exactly sure, but it's this really, really intriguing fitted drop waist bodice going on. Normally the drop waist is not body conscious. Normally it sort of falls down. It doesn't really create a whole waist and a hip and things like that. So I'm intrigued by it. Big sort of puffy skirt. It's black. It has what looks to be crystal perforations going on. So it's like a perforated circle and then it's been trimmed in these little crystals. I don't really know how Karl Lagerfeldian it is. I don't think it's really that Karl Lagerfeldian. I'll give you the drop waist. I'll give you maybe it's technically not really, but like sort of trying to be a robe de style kind of situation. But even then, I think that's a little bit of a stretch. I don't understand. So I'm good. Next up, we have Imaan Hammam, and she is wearing the brand Standing Ground. It's a young, up-and-coming brand. I believe that it's in Fashion East, which is a fashion designer incubator based in the UK. It's a tough dress. Listen, I like the Standing Ground concept. I've looked at a few of their other designs. I do think that these sort of draped around the waist or hip or pelvic area drapery is really cool. It's really, really beautiful. But the thing is, it's this form-fitted white dress, nothing really crazy. It hits the floor really beautifully, but slung around the waist is these sort of white baubles. I understand that they are meant to be pearls or look like pearls, but the issue is that they either look like anal beads that were left out in the sun for too long, or it looks like alien intestines and like there's no in between there. It's rough. Now I will say that we look at like spring 1980 from Chloé. There were those sort of slung around beads that sat on the model's waists and it was intriguing and it was cool. And I think maybe that's what we were kind of referencing. Maybe it was meant to reference pearls, Chanel, but just done in this manner and the way that they sort of fringe down in the front. I get what we were going for. It's just uncomfortable to look at. I also feel like I'm in like Alien vs. Predator. I'm scared in so many ways. I like Standing Ground still. I think Imaan is gorgeous and, you know, she can wear anything, but I get why there was some heat for this look. Next up, we had Jennifer Lopez, and she wore Ralph Lauren. Now, she wore a very exposing dress in black. It is a halter style, so Karl. There's a big sort of flower right at the neck area, which is pretty Karl. Then we have what is essentially two strips of black fabric that come down, cover the bust, expose the sort of chest area, expose the arms. We have black opera gloves. Then there is a black sash that sits around the waist and also the hips. And then a light pink, really beautiful silk skirt. It's nice. And then the black sort of two trains come and flow out as well. Listen, it's a Ralph Lauren, so it's going to be kind of simple. It's a halter dress, okay, check. But I think everything else, I'm a little concerned about. I just don't think it's great. I don't really think it's amazing. Looks very well done. You know what I mean? Like, it fits her phenomenally. It's beautifully constructed. It's just, don't think it's really a super attractive look. I don't really think it's super duper on theme. I think something could have been done about it, you know what I mean? I think we could have lent ourselves to more intriguing styles. I feel like Ralph could have gotten into like the whole idea of like quilted styles that he did in what, the 1980s that were made out of these beautiful American quilts. They were historic, they were gorgeous, and I think that it sort of tied into this whole concept, Chloé and graphic motifs and beautiful prints and things like that. I think if we had done that, I would have been sold. I think also if we're gonna do the halter style, like let's really go and do like 1930s glamour, like really get into the nitty gritty of that, really channel some sort of Chanel look from the 1930s, maybe a Patou moment here or there, like something intriguing. But I don't think that this look is great from an aesthetic perspective. It's unfortunate, to say the very least. Next up, we have Jeremy Strong, who is wearing Prada, the green shirt, the brown jacket, the black pants, the black square toe shoe. Like, there's a lot going on here. And it's Prada, so like I get it. But at the same time, it's a little bit too much for me. Do I think that the brown jacket, very signature kind of Prada color, the green shirt, again, signature Prada color. And do I think that there is a history of Karl Lagerfeldianness going on in the shirt because of the little ruffle that runs down the placket where the buttons are? There is actually, if you look at Chanel Fall 2006, the roughly sort of placketedness goes on as well. So I mean, like, it's a thing, it's happened, but at the same time, I think it's a little bit of a stretch. Does it feel very Prada in terms of mixing black and brown and green all together? Sure. I do think that if you look over sort of neck area, we can see that little jet of black going on, and I'm sure that that's meant to sort of correlate to the pants and the shoe. And in a weird way, does it sort of feel Prada-esque? And so I'm kind of like, okay, yeah. Yes, but at the same time, objectively, it's a rough outfit. I understand that Kendall Roy makes choices in his life. This might not have been the one that I chose, though. Next up, we have Jessica Chastain. She is wearing a custom Gucci look, and I actually think that this is a pretty solid job done by both Jessica and Gucci here. It's a strapless ball gown that flows into an A-line silhouette. As we reach around the knee area, we can see that that big tulle loofah-iness breaks out, and then a sheer sort of style comes underneath what I would call this sort of top layer shell. Sheer, it's sort of flowy, and as we reach the bottom of sheer skirt that falls under, we can see again sort of trimmed in this big, thick, dense tulle, black loofah, very intriguing. There does seem to be some sort of sheath skirt underneath that sort of sits underneath the sheer and does sort of cover that element of Jessica's body. The thing that I'll say about it is it does feel Chanel end of collection, haute couture sort of dress vibe. I think the silhouette feels a little bit 30s. I think both in terms of the use of the sheer sort of fabric and also the tulle. In a weird way, I think that this really kind of works. I think she looks great. I think the silhouette fits. I also think it does feel very sort of recent Gucci red carpet. I think the tulle, the sheer, the sort of 1930s glamour and Hollywood sort of essence is very much so what Gucci has done red carpet-wise for the past, I don't know, 2 years, I would say. And so in a weird way, I think it sort of all formulates to make a lot of sense in terms of referencing Karl well, and at the same time keeping in with what Gucci has been doing for the past few years. I'm good with that. Next, we have Julia Garner. She is also wearing a custom Gucci look. Now, it's a halter style dress with a big sort of triangular cutout, and it has a black cape with pink lining as well. Now, listen, let's break down the dress first. I do think it's smart, A, because you have the halter style, again, 1930s, old school style and essence. Karl loved the 1930s, as we've said multiple times. But the thing that I think is intriguing about this halter style is that it also has a little bit of a high sort of stiff collar that creates a part and effect of the halter. We can see that the collar is also trimmed in little pearls as it goes along the edges, and also just little pearls sort of inside of it as well. And I think in a fun way, it is humorous. It pays homage to Karl as a personal dresser and persona, but at the same time pays homage to a style that he very much so did utilize, did love over his very long career. The white dress sort of flows down, fits decently. I think it's okay. It's not really memorable, not really exciting, but I do think, again, the collar works. As for the cape, I think that it's meant to signify a homage to like the black jacket element that Karl always wore over his big sort of collar. I just think that, again, in this sort of Gucci style, these big capes are very much so something that Alessandro Michele was doing when he was at Gucci. And I do think that the pink lining, the fact that it's crystallized is nice because it adds that shimmer and shine and ostentatiousness that we know about Gucci. In a weird way, it's not my favorite look whatsoever. I do think that it definitely does its own job of paying homage. I think it probably could have been a little bit better in terms of the cape, and it's not exactly the way that I would have interpreted his work, but I think it works. Next up, we have Caitlin Dever, and she is wearing Michael Kors. Now, this is a strapless mermaid gown. It has cutouts on the side and a big sort of flower that juts out right in the center of the stomach area. I think that the flower is meant to sort of represent the camellia and the use of the flower throughout a lot of Karl's time at Chanel. The dress is also made of this red floral lace. You know, Chanel lace, Karl lace, it makes sense. And these flowers that are opaque are actually embroidered with little paillettes and sequins, which I do have to say is something Michael Kors has been doing for, again, the past few years, and I do think it's actually a rather nice little signature. I think it always works. I think it always looks good. Will I say that this was really like a Karl Lagerfeld reference? I'm not sure. Yes, we could say that, you know, referencing fans and things like that, or the cutouts, but it doesn't feel as smartly referenced as a lot of other styles. Do I think that it has a sort of 1930s flair to it with the mermaid skirt? Sure, but again, I think it's a little bit lackluster in terms of referencing there as well. The thing is, I think the dress looks great. It's a beautiful dress, looks lovely on her. I just don't think that it really does a good job referencing. I don't think it really pays a wonderful homage. I think we just kind of skated by on the fact that it's a Pretty Mermaid dress. And so, not approved. Next up, we have Karlie Kloss, and she is wearing Loewe. This is a custom look by Jonathan Anderson for Loewe. I like the look. Now, here's the thing. What this is most definitely referencing is the spring 1983 Haute Couture collection that Karl Lagerfeld debuted for Chanel. What we had when we saw that collection is none other than Inez de la Fressange, who was one of Karl's muses, actually recreate the character of Coco Chanel herself. And Karlie is most definitely paying homage to the reference of that. The thing is, Inez came down the runway with these big sort of pearls and jewelry draped all over her body, and she had a little black veil over top too. She was smoking a cigarette. It was very Coco Chanel coded. The thing that I think is interesting is you have essentially a really sort of simple dress, but what's really intriguing about it is the fact that you have a print of what looks to be strings of pearls, both around the neck and around the waist. Also on the arms, you have jewelry that runs up the sleeves as well. What I think is interesting is Karl liked to trompe l'oeil. He loved the idea of humor and wit, and I think that Jonathan Anderson is very much so in that genre of playing with humor and sarcasm and wit and things of that nature when it comes to clothing to make it campy and avant-garde and kitschy and weird and fun. So I think the fact that you have this sort of faux pearl necklace situation going on and a faux belt around the waist and faux bracelets that sit on the wrists as well, I just think it's smart. And then to actually put the pearls over top again, I think adds another dimension to it. In my opinion, I think Karlie did a very good job here. So did Loewe, so did Jonathan Anderson. Next up, we have Kate Moss and Lila Moss. They are both wearing Fendi. Now, from my understanding, Kate Moss's look is supposed to be, I believe, a custom look. It is a silky slip dress with a little bit of lace detailing towards the neckline area, and then we also have a little bit of lace that also runs right under the bust area as well. There also seems to be a tad bit of chiffon in this light pink that sort of creates sleeves and also a little bit of a train. It's nothing really crazy. What I will say is if you look up Kate Moss history, you will see that like slip dresses, lingerie like that, worn as dresses, everyday attire, very much so as a Kate Moss sort of staple and signature. I also will say that a lot of Fendi was very bearing the body. I think more in the early 2000s you see a lot of chiffons, a lot of sheer. Now there isn't a whole lot of body on display in that sort of way, but I do think that the sheer chiffon element is most definitely paying homage to Karl's work at Fendi. And then I think that the slip dress is a little bit more Kate referencing by her friend Kim Jones. It's not my favorite look. I wish that we had gone a little bit more in like the Fendi archive personally, and I've done a little bit of research on Fendi, so I did look to see if there was any slip dresses that I could see from any point. I really couldn't. There could be some that existed, most definitely. I'm not saying that there aren't, it's just I couldn't find any, so I don't really see Karl reference dress-wise, but I definitely see the Kate referencing herself dress-wise. And then we have Lila Moss, who is wearing a Fendi look that's actually from one of Karl's last Fendi Haute Couture, Haute Fureur shows. It is a pink dress that has a sort of cage corset detailing in the center, and it looks like it's a really beautiful, fluffy, gorgeous pink fur, but in reality it's not pink fur, it's actually pink marabou feather. And we've talked about this before on these Met Gala videos about how Karl's idea at Fendi with Fendi Haute Couture was to, at a certain point, take these materials that aren't fur and make them look like fur so that customers that didn't want to wear fur could feel like they're wearing fur, but they're not. So in that concept, what I think here we can see is the Fendi team is very good at what they do because these feathers, they look fur-like, you know what I mean? Like from afar, you'd say, oh, beautiful fur, beautiful, gorgeous, stunning, pink, light, fluffy, wonderful. But in reality, the fact that the feathers have been manipulated to look like strands of hair and fur and things like that, I think is really rather miraculous. I think the fall 2018 collection is a really good one too. I think that the dress fits her really, really well. The beautiful flow of that skirt, even though it's made of this marabou, the way that it creates these sort of waves of fabric in the skirt is also really, really nice to see. I love the way that it fits up top. The deep plunge is really sweet and cool and fun and sexy, but I appreciate that the Fendi team went into the archives and did moments like that here. It's approved, I guess, but barely. barely passing. Next up, we have Keke Palmer, who is wearing a custom Sergio Hudson look. Now, this look is a custom-made tweed by Sergio Hudson. It's made up of what seems to be sort of blue, pink, and yellow to a degree. It's a form-fitting floor-length tweed gown, which isn't normally what's done with tweed. Now, Keke also did wear this cape that is sort of flowing off of her body on the stairs. From my understanding, it's probably a reference to Andre Leon Talley, who wore these really beautiful, big, large silk capes. Karl was a very, very good friend of his. They were, sort of designed in that similar manner. I didn't mention it when Kylie Jenner wore that Jean-Paul Gaultier look by Hayder Ackerman. That was sort of the reference there, and I'm wondering if that is sort of what's going on here as well. The thing, though, I will say about the dress, it is a little bit simple in terms of it's tweed, but I do appreciate the fact that Sergio Hudson and his team actually developed their own tweed for this, so they're not just using pre-existing tweed that, you can get, I guess not anywhere, but at least it feels a little bit more invested in the idea of the history of Chanel and tweed makers in Scotland and things like that. I also think that the fit of it is phenomenal. Again, tweed is not a fabric that you normally associate with like body-conscious styles. Normally, it's very sort of boxy. That's the reason why we see it in skirts and jackets and not often in form-fitting gowns. Getting it to fit phenomenally. I mean, at the waist, it is sucked in. It's gorgeous. It's really, really well done. Sergio Hudson, I think, also is a great designer in terms of technical prowess. He's very precise. He's very linear, very sort of minimal to a degree too. He's that definition of nouveau American sportswear. And I think this is a great example of being able to do that in a different fabric. So while in terms of inspiration, it's a little bit simple, but I do think in terms of craftsmanship, quality, and textile development, I'm into the vibe. Next up, we have Kim Petras, who is wearing a custom Marc Jacobs look. It is a cocktail dress in white and black with a large sort of train custom platform kiki boots in white, or I would say more silver and black crystal, and then sort of opera-length gloves. I don't love the look whatsoever. I love Kim. I think that she's very outgoing. I think she's very outlandish in terms of her fashions and her styles. I just don't think the dress is great. I don't really see what the inspiration in terms of Karl was, and I know that Marc Jacobs' team was doing their own thing, it seemed. I just don't think that we got a real sort of Karl reference. I think that it's very sort of draped and wrapped and all of that, but I don't think there was really like a direction of the draping and the wrapping. I think that the length is a little bit awkward too. Yes, a cocktail dress I think could work. It should work. I think it would be fine for the Met. I just think that we should have done something that was maybe a little bit more Karl Lagerfeld-esque. I just don't get the dress. There is sort of black leather strips that run along the dress, but even then, I think the black and the white, it's just a very bottom of the barrel, oh, we reference Karl because it's black and white. I don't see where we were going with this. I think like a drop waist style could have been cool. Kim in a robe de style, Kim in 1930s sort of halter neck, gorgeous glamour, Kim in like a fun tweed skirt suit, Kim in like a big faux fur. There's a lot of things I think Kim Petras could do very, very well. I just think that this dress, nobody could do well in. It's not a great dress. I love the shoes. I think they're fun. I think they're cool. I just think the dress doesn't do anybody any justice. So I feel alone. It makes me sad, but it's bad. Thank you. My album is dropping on May 28th. Next up, we have Lea Michele, and she is wearing a custom Michael Kors look. Now, from my understanding, Lea Michele's inspiration for this Michael Kors look was meant to be the sort of Ziegfeld Follies, who were Americans that based their performance and theater after the Parisian sort of Folies Bergère. Now, I'm pretty positive that the Ziegfeld Follies, as we would call them with the American accent, is based on the French theater production and company called the Folies Bergère. Now, obviously, we all know that Lea Michele is playing Fanny Brice from Funny Girl on Broadway, and I'm sure that that is why we are referencing the Ziegfeld Follies, which I like. I think it's cool. I think it's funny. I think it's playing into the idea and the notion of what Lea Michele is doing. I just think that Fanny Brice, she was around the 1910s, and then she also came back in like the 1920s into the 1930s and did her, on stage work. Feel like a drop waist dress could have been really good, really fun, really cool here. Even if we got into like more 30s glamour, I get it. I would love it. I just think that silhouette-wise, I'm a bit let down. The look does seem to be inspired by costumes from the Ziegfeld Girls movie from 1941. I'm pretty positive the movie obviously is looking back, you know, like the early 20th century sort of styles. And what we can see is these beautiful fringed costumes of silver that glitter and gold as the models move their arms. I kind of wish we got that here. I think that that would have been a little bit more exciting, a little bit more intriguing, a little bit more daring. I think also the silhouette in and of itself, a little bit Poiret-esque, early Karl Lagerfeld inspiration. I just think it would have been a little bit more fun. I do think that obviously this is a little bit more commercial, a little bit more intriguing, the full sequins in silver and the subtle fringe that goes along the sleeves and along the bottom of the skirt. Like, it definitely does pay homage to that, but at the same time, I'm missing out on a little bit of Karl Lagerfeldiness. You know what I mean? Like, listen, I love the backstory, I love the Ziegfeld, I love the Folly, I love the Bergère. Like, I do think we need a little bit more Karl Lagerfeldiness going on in order to really sell it to me. I just think the concept would have been saved for a different outing. You know what I mean? But listen, like, going forward, if Lea Michele wants to do Fanny Bryce cosplay on the carpets, I'm here for it. I'm waiting patiently. Next up, we have Lily James, and she is wearing a custom Tamara Ralph look. Now, I actually recently learned that Tamara Ralph is one part of Ralph and Russo, because Ralph and Russo is no longer duoing. You learn something new every day. Now, this dress in and of itself, when I looked at it at first, I was kind of like, it's a black strapless gown. It's big, full length ball gown silhouette. There's a little bit of a flower right in the center of the bust area. There's a belt. Not the best. The little fingerless gloves, though, I say Karl homage, and then a big, long, faux skirt. It's gigantic, has big train, and now for most part, everybody's kind of going to be like, wow, okay, listen, you did fingerless gloves, cool. Not a Karl reference, but it is. So here's the thing. The intriguing element of the look is the smocking of this leather skirt that goes on right from below the waist to cover the pelvic region. If we look at Karl Lagerfeld's style, specifically one that was found in the actual exhibit, there is a lot of smocking, or I guess not a lot, but there is smocking that goes throughout Karl's career. It's very much so a part of the work that he did, whether it was at Chanel, maybe a little bit at Chloé. But in reality, it exists. It happened. It was there. So I think that Lily James and Tamara Ralph did a really good job of, again, sort of pulling out a reference that's not common knowledge, easy, surface level, yada yada. It's a little bit more subtle. It's a little bit more nuanced, a little bit more thought through. I think it works. It's not my favorite dress. I don't love it. I don't think it's the best thing ever, but I do think that it captures, most definitely, a technique that Karl utilized. It doesn't feel blah and boring and uninteresting in that sense. I think the dress in and of itself is a little bit been there, done that, have the t-shirt, but I appreciate the fact that we again got something a little bit different than everybody else, and so I'm very happy with that. Next up, we have Liu Wen, and she is wearing Tory Burch. Now listen, this is a custom creation. It has a little off the shoulder, sort of very simple black fitted dress element up top. It's simple, it's easy, again, off the shoulder, Karl style, cool, bing bang boom. But what I think is really intriguing and definitely is a sort of Karl reference is the way that this black sort of dress has an underskirt that is made up of black chiffon and white chiffon underneath, and then is covered in these sort of fake flowers. Definitely not camellias, but again, flowers, use, all that sort of stuff. It's very Karl. As we can see from an actual piece from the exhibit, Karl Lagerfeld, A Line of Beauty, this is again common. This is something that Karl did. He would take these sort of very simple tops in A-line figures. Here it's a little bit more fitted. He would then have a longer and bigger sort of skirt that would flow out underneath and would be covered in fabric flowers, dripping in embroideries and embellishments, and would make a sort of case for the gorgeousness of embroidery. So I think this is a little bit different than Karl's traditional styles because it's so fitted at the sort of bodice, waist, hip, and it definitely has an intriguing sort of fan out feature, but I do think it works. I do think it's on theme. I do think it's a little bit less, again, surface level. I'm not obsessed with it, but I think that it hits the theme, and I think that that is then appropriate. Next up, we have Madeline Klein, and she is wearing a custom Stella McCartney look. Now, it's a very sort of simple fitted black dress. It's strapless. It has a subtle train at the back. It hugs the figure in all different ways. The only thing that really makes it sort of intriguing is this fringe that tries to contour the body, you know what I mean? It has a sort of silver outline. It allows the black to again sort of hug the figure on the sides, and draws your eye in. It's a sort of optical illusion. It's very smart. I understand why we do it. The thing is, you're probably saying, Luke, but what is the reference to Karl Lagerfeld? And I would say, I'm actually not sure that there really is one. I do think that there is meant to be a reference to Karl Lagerfeld here, even though him and Stella had like beef at a certain point. But I'm pretty positive that when you look back at Chloé collections, from what I've seen, I haven't seen every single look from every single Chloé collection ever that Karl worked on, but I'm pretty positive that this is a reference to a Martin Sitbon look for Chloé, who is a designer that took over Chloé 1 or 2 creative directors after Karl left the first time. In the spring 1991 Chloé collection by Sitbon, we can actually see that there is a sort of bodysuit style that has this sort of tasselage and fringe and embellishment that runs down the front. So it's definitely a thing from Chloé. I'm not sure if Martine Sitbon came up with that herself for Chloé or if it's something that was referencing stuff in the archive. I'm not really sure. And again, we could also say that to a degree, Karl is very important in the history of Chloé. So anything that any designer from Chloé is referencing might be a reference to Karl Lagerfeld, even though I don't really think that's necessarily true because, you know, there was however many years, about 10 years before Karl really got involved in the design aspect of it. I'm getting into semantics here. I, from right now, cannot determine that this is actually a Karl Lagerfeld reference. I can determine this is more of a Chloé reference. And the other thing that I think is weird too with Stella is when you look back at the Aubrey Plaza look and you look back also at the Madeline Klein look here, there was a lot of stuff that Stella did while she was at Chloé that was most definitely referencing Karl. So I'm kind of confused why she didn't tap into those things. This could be a Karl reference. I'm not saying that it's not, but what I'm saying is from my research as of right now, and I could be wrong, to me this is technically not a Karl Lagerfeld reference. So, do I think that she looks nice? Yeah, sure, absolutely. But do I see it being on theme as of right now? No. I appreciate Madeline Klein. I just don't appreciate the dress. Sorry. Next up we have Marianne Cotillard, and she is wearing Chanel. And I hate it. And I think that's how I know that it's a true Karl Lagerfeld creation, you know what I mean? Now, this is a look from Chanel's fall 2007 Haute Couture collection. It's straight off the runway. It's made up of a short silver and gold embroidered mini dress. Really, really simple, really, really clean, really, really easy. And then from the sort of shoulder area, we get like a little bit of a cold shoulder, but also these sort of swags of yellow, very, very light yellow chiffon that sort of flow down, hit around, I would say, the ankle area in certain parts, and creates almost like a faux cape situation. It's really strange. It's really weird. I do love her hair though, because personally it reminds me of that Versailles collection that they did. Now the other important thing about that collection is Karl focused on the perspective from the side of all of the garments. Showing it from the front doesn't really do it a whole lot of justice, but that there is most definitely a sort of movement and flow of this flouncy chiffon that moves and sort of creates an intriguing textile and texture and flow and cascading element. Again, it's not my favorite dress in the entire world, but it is certainly something that you can't say undeniably is not Karl Lagerfeld, so there we have it. Next up we have Mary J. Blige, and she is wearing Burberry. Now, it's a plunging sort of bodysuit style with a large flowing out train sort of skirt. It's made up of, from my understanding, this sort of sheer mesh material that is covered in blue flowers, particularly, I believe, roses that are crystallized all throughout, and then a knee-high boot. It has long sleeves that flow, and then there's also little fingerless gloves that match, which I think is kind of smart. But all in all, I don't love the look. I just think there's something off with the boots, even though, like, I know that's a Mary J. Blige signature. I just think we could have done, I don't know, the sheer mesh style in the boot, and that would have matched the rest of the look. Now, as for the look itself, I don't love it. Do we think that maybe there's a little bit of provenance to a degree with what we're referencing? Sure. I think that these flowers that are, I guess, appliqued over top of this mesh maybe is a reference to the Chanel sort of lace that is very much so associated with Karl's work towards the end of his career. I think about certain looks from maybe spring 2019, spring 2018, Haute Couture from Chanel, and like I get it. I understand kind of where we're looking for reference. I just think that Mary J. Blige could have went for a different silhouette. I feel like we see this a lot for Mary J. Blige, and I think that this is the time to really step outside of your comfort zone, really kind of go for it, really do something a little bit more intriguing. I also think that like the piece of mesh that is holding this very deep plunge together is very obvious, and it looks really awkward, and I don't know why the Burberry team didn't really do anything about that. I just don't see it. I wish that Mary J. Blige would kind of lend herself a little bit more, either to Burberry and went for like plaid, and that would have been easy peasy, lemon squeezy, or lend herself a little bit more to Karl's actual silhouettes that are a little bit more well known. I just think that something else could have been done. I think her in like a beautiful, bright faux fur in the same sort of colors with geometric materials and motifs, and also maybe even the floral applique or floral element of the faux fur. It just could have been cooler. I just think this feels like Mary J. Blige I've seen a bunch of times, and that doesn't help me at all. Next up, we have Maud Apatow, and she is wearing Chloé. This is a custom look by the brand, and it is a reference to Chloé's Fall 1983 collection, which I love. Now, Maud is wearing this black gown. In reality, up top, it's a sort of bateau neckline. It's sleeveless. As we reach around the sort of hip area, it flows into a very sort of simple skirt. I don't really love the fit of the skirt. Personally, it's fine, but it's not great. It looks a little awkward. But the thing that's really intriguing, and the thing that I love, is that the cutout detail is very much so trimmed in this gorgeous crystal and beaded applique that runs the gamut of the cutouts, and then from the center juts out this little arrow. If we look at Chloé Fall 1983, we can see that the placket of this dress that Karl designed actually has an arrow that runs down the front as well. I think it's a cool, much more modern reinterpretation of this style. When we look at the Chloé style, it's very 80s. The shoulder is sharp, collared shirt dress situation, the sleeves, it just feels very businesswoman 80s cool. But here I think Maud interprets it in a much more young and fun 2020s sort of style. It's easy, it's breezy, it works. So I bow down to the Chloé team because I think they really, out of all of the brands, did the best job of interpreting cool, fun, exciting, intriguing styles from their archives in the best way possible. Shout out to Maud. And the last look that we have to discuss is Maya Hawke wearing Prada. Now, this is a custom style, but it's definitely based on the appliques from the Fall 2023 collection that Prada showed recently. The look is made up of a cocktail-length sort of boxy dress, and then over top is a long floor-length coat. Creates a massive train. And the thing is, if we zoom in, we can see that the applique going on here are these really beautiful sort of flowers with long stems that have the white flowers at the end. It's beautiful. It's really, really well done. I think that it's meant to be a reference to Chanel sort of brides and the white sort of styles that you see at the end of most Chanel haute couture shows. But at the same time, I think that Prada does a really good job of keeping themselves in the foray. It's definitely a Prada sort of applique. It's strange, it's odd, it's sterile, but at the same time, it's beautiful, it's inviting, it's enveloping. It's a weird sort of moment. I love the heel choice. I think it's super funny, but also like at the same time, I'm disgusted by it. Like that little baby kitten heel. It's like an embryonic kitten heel, and I'm into it. I also think Maya Hawke lends herself to the outfit that she wears. She always sort of goes for it. She is an actor, so she acts in it, and I think this is a good example of that. I like it. I think it's like Prada does Chanel haute couture bride in that weird, funky, fun Prada way. So, I stand. Now, that is the end of our 2023 Met Gala Part 3 fashion roast. Listen, let's talk about best and worst. Best, I'm gonna give it to Allison Williams and Patou. Accurate. I'm also gonna shockingly put Ashley Park in there because I like that Michael Kors moment. I think that she did a good job of referencing. I'm gonna put Jessica Chastain in there. I'm gonna put Lila Moss in there. I'm gonna put Carly Kloss in there. Halle Bailey, I like that Gucci moment. Oh, and Burna Boy, because I think the Burberry was smart. As for worst, I'm going to put Christina Ricci, Fendi, get it. Kim Petras and Marc Jacobs also just did not get it. Mary J. Blige and the Burberry, Aubrey Plaza and Caitlin Dever, again, I just like didn't see the referencing. And Jennifer Lopez, because I just think it was bad. That is that. I hope you guys enjoyed. Look out for part 4. It will be coming, and we're going to do an after party look too, because there's a lot of cool referencing there. So with that, I bid you all adieu till the next one, and TTYL.